Hey, my name is Rowan Smith and I want to welcome you to the Training for Trekking podcast. Now, this is the world's very first podcast which is entirely dedicated to helping you train, prepare and conquer your upcoming hike, trek or mountain adventure. So once a week, I'm going to be giving you quality and practical information on the subjects of physical preparation for trekking, dealing with altitude and nutrition on the trail, so you can know everything you need to be doing to have the best chance of a safe, enjoyable and successful adventure. So now you know what you're in for. Let's get into today's episode. Alright, hello guys. Today we are talking about how to deal with burning calves while hiking. Now, this was inspired by a question I got the other day on the Training for Hiking and Trekking Facebook group from a new member who posted up that they struggled with burning and tight calves while hiking, and they were just asking for my recommendations around that. And I wanted to use this as inspiration for an episode because this is a really, really common situation for hikers. And it's something I deal with personally when I'm on the trail, and I know a lot of people struggle with when they're on their adventures. When you're hiking, the calves do take a beating. They do so much work when you're going uphill, downhill. When you're on the flat, they stabilize your feet, stabilize your ankles, stabilize your knees, and they are an essential muscle to develop in your preparations. But all too often, even though they are incredibly important, they get overlooked in training because, let's face it, they're not very exciting to train. It's one small muscle, and they often get overlooked for things that are a little bit more fun, like squats and lunges and step-ups and all of that jazz. But they are very, very important. So today we're going to be going into a little bit of depth around how you can alleviate this situation where you're always getting burning and tight calves while you're hiking, and how you can work through particular mobility training as well as particular strengthening training to overcome this issue. So hopefully by the end of this episode, you've got a really, really good insight into how to get over this issue and apply all this stuff into your training. So the first point of call most people think of when they're getting tight and burning calves is mobility and stretching. And they're like, look, my calves are tight, my calves are sore, so I need to stretch. And yes, this is important, and doing some regular stretching and foam rolling on your calves can be very, very beneficial. Now, in your weekly training or in your regular training, there's a few places I would highly recommend you have a think about putting this in. So number one is doing some type of regular calf mobility in your strength training sessions. So if you've been listening to my stuff for a while, you know I'm a big fan of when you're doing your strength training to fill up the rest periods with something productive. So not just sitting around, not just playing on your phone, not just counting down the time to go again, but actually filling up those periods with something that's relatively beneficial. And this is the perfect situation to do a bit of mobility work. And if you're in this situation, the perfect situation to do some calf stretching or some calf mobility. So in your strength sessions, in your rest periods, do a little bit of calf mobility there. The second situation is I'd recommend probably doing a bit of regular foam rolling through your week. So if you're always dealing with tight calves and you're always getting burny calves, maybe just spending 2 minutes a day, 2 minutes before you go to bed, just doing a little bit of rolling on your calves, and it can give you a little bit of relief. The third situation is doing regular warm-ups before training and for hiking. So you should be doing this anyway, but just making sure in your warm-ups that you do a little bit of calf mobility, maybe a little bit of calf stretching or a particular exercise to help relieve your calves before you train and before hiking. That'll just help them move a little bit freer, help them feel a little bit more comfortable and maybe not take as much pressure. And then finally, just doing a bit of foam rolling after or during a day's worth of hiking. So I'm a big fan of doing recovery sessions after a big day of hiking, and foam rolling can be a great situation here where you can help relieve sore muscles, relax the body and just make everything feel good. If you have been dealing with tight calves or burning calves, spending a little bit of time at the end of a day's hiking rolling up and down, whether that's on a day hike, an overnight hike or a multi-day trek. Also, if you're really, really struggling during a day's worth of hiking, doing a bit of rolling in your rest stops while you're actually on the trail. So in your lunch period, in your morning tea, in your afternoon tea, getting your water bottle and just doing a little bit of rolling. That can definitely give it a bit of relief, and I personally use that quite a bit in the past when my calves feel like they're burning out. Now, all of these areas are important, and they definitely can help in this situation. But most hikers tend to leave it here, and they're like, look, I get tight calves, I'm just going to stretch, I'm just going to foam roll, and that'll help me. But even though it gives them short-term relief, they keep on getting these burning and tight calves. So they keep on stretching and foam rolling, but then it just goes in this circle again and again and again and again. And no matter how much stretching and foam rolling they do, nothing really changes. And what generally happens is if you're already stretching and you're already foam rolling and your calves are never getting any better, the simple answer to this is they're just not strong enough. And the reason they keep on getting burny, the reason they keep on getting tight, is they're not strong enough to support you on the trail, so the body has to compensate. It really is as simple as this. So in this situation, you can't rely on just stretching and mobilizing. And in 95% of hikers out there, this is probably going to be a situation you're in, and you do need to strengthen it. So now I want to touch on strength training, and because sometimes some people overlook a few crucial points when it comes to strengthening their calves, but if you get your head around these things, you'll make sure you're covering all the bases that you need. Now to start with, I need to just give you a very, very brief anatomy lesson. Basically, the calves have two main muscles. You've got your gastrocnemius, which is the top of the calf, which is very, very easily visible, and you can literally just see that on anyone when you're doing calf raises, when you're hiking, and you can see that muscle at the top of the calf. Most people are familiar with this, and it is very, very important to train this area. But there's another muscle which is a little bit lower, which you can't actually see, which is called the soleus, and it is very, very important to train too. 90% of hikers who are doing calf training are probably just training that gastrocnemius, just because that's what it's easy to hit. People are very familiar with this, and they overlook the soleus. But they're both important to train. They both have their very, very important roles in this situation. And if you are just training one muscle, you're probably leaving yourself a little bit of room for error, and that's probably contributing to the issue. So you want to be training both. So how do you do this? Well, it's really, really, really simple. To hit the gastrocnemius, you want to be doing what's called straight leg calf raises, which are the calf raises most hikers are pretty familiar with. This is where you're standing on 2 feet or 1 foot, and you literally just push up onto your toes, feel a big burn at the top of your calf, and then come back down. Now you can either do this off one leg, off 2 legs, you can do this off the floor, off a step, you can do it with weight or with body weight. Very, very important to include in your preparation, and this is working your gastrocnemius. Now to work the soleus, you're doing a very, very similar exercise. So you're still doing a calf raise, but what you're doing is something that's called a bent leg calf raise. So before you push up onto your toes, what you want to do is bend your knees slightly, keep those knees bent, and then push up onto your toes. Now what this does is it changes the joint angles pretty significantly. It takes the gastrocnemius out of the equation, and it makes sure the soleus is doing pretty much all the work. So again, you can do this exercise on 2 legs at a time, you can do it on 1 leg at a time, you can do it off the floor, off a step, you can do it with a weight or anything like you want. But basically you want to be covering those straight leg calf raises and those bent leg calf raises in your week. So an easy way to break this up is if you're doing 2 strength sessions in a week, which I highly recommend most hikers do, you might do one day where you do a little bit of straight leg calf work and another day where you do a bit of bent leg calf work. Super, super simple, and make sure you're hitting both. Now, as with any type of strength training, you want to make sure that's progressing over time. So a really easy way to progress things, and something that I very much like, is to start off with 2 legs at a time on the floor, then move on to 2 legs at a time or going off a step. The next one is 1 leg at a time off the floor. Next one is 1 leg at a time off a step, and then start adding weight from there. And that simple progression will probably get you through for about 6 months of training if you do it right. Super, super simple, but as with everything, just make sure you're building over time. Now, the final area you might want to look at with your training for calves is if you're doing all that stuff and you do want a little bit more and you want to build that endurance and just develop it a little bit more, you might look at doing a little bit of skipping or hopping training. Now, as I did on a whole podcast a little while ago, skipping can be a great addition to develop a little extra resilience, a little bit extra force, and a little bit extra endurance around the calf. So simply doing 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes of skipping at the start of a session can be really, really great. Obviously, you want to start off small here and slowly build yourself up. If you don't like using a skipping rope, you can do the same motion but just hopping off 2 feet at a time on the spot. And as you get a little bit stronger, you can start hopping on 1 foot at a time. You can start going forward and back. You can start going side to side. You can start doing little figure eights, and that's a really, really great addition into that. So hopefully that all gives you a relatively detailed insight into how to get on top of burning and tight calves. If you are in this situation, yes, do your mobility and your stretching, fit that into your week and be consistent with that, but don't stop there. Make sure you're doing your strength training. Make sure you're hitting both of those muscles with both that straight leg and bent leg calf training. And then if you do need a little bit extra and you do feel like you need to continue on and progress that, add in a little bit of hopping and skipping. Tick off all those things, stick with it for 4 to 6 weeks, and you will notice a massive difference on the trail, and you'll notice a massive difference in your comfort levels. And I highly, highly, highly recommend anyone gives that a go. Now, if you did want to explore this subject in a little bit more detail, if you did want some video descriptions of some of the exercises I mentioned today, or wanted me to go in a little bit more detail around any of these topics, I highly recommend you join up on the Training for Hiking and Trekking Facebook group. Now, this is a private Facebook group I have running on Facebook, in which I put up daily content exploring a lot of these subjects which I talk about on the podcast in a lot more detail. I do video tutorials around exercises, a little bit deeper instructions around certain things, and constantly putting up content and information to help your hiking adventures. So if you did want to learn a little bit more about this or any other subject I've touched on the podcast, I highly recommend you join up in that group. You can either find the link in the show notes below or find the Training for Hiking and Trekking Facebook group on Facebook. So thank you so much for listening today, guys. I really do hope you've enjoyed this episode. Any questions, please do let me know. But if not, have a lovely day, and we'll talk to you very, very soon.